So hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. It is my pleasure to have Shaun Porter here, and as you may or may not know, that Shaun is the Chief Operating Officer at ABI Wellness. He's also a neuroscientist and is going to be talking to us today about neuroplasticity and why we want to know about neuroplasticity. It's really important, but we don't know enough about it. So whatever reason brings you here, welcome. There's going to be an opportunity for some questions and some discussion at the end. So please do stay with us. And this event is being recorded, so we can send it out if you need to dash out or if you can't even be here at all. So welcome to Shaun, welcome all of you, and I look forward to the conversation ahead of us.
Thanks, Jason. Did you want to start now, or do we want to wait a couple minutes for some people to get to join, or we're recording it, so we should just get going?
Yeah, I think people will trickle in. I think that that's kind of the way it is these days. I'm thinking of my last PAC meeting where I was, busy in the kitchen, and I had a Zoom on here, and I had a Zoom on here, and I had a podcast here, and I think probably everyone is probably ready to go.
Perfect. Okay, well, then I will start the presentation and just get started.
As you're doing that, Shaun, I'm going to welcome questions in the chat. I will be moderating that and welcome you to put a question in there. There will be lots of time for questions towards the end. So take it away, Shaun.
Perfect. Thanks, Jason. So thanks, everybody. Very excited to be here to talk about the brain and neuroplasticity. So what we're going to talk about is how do we harness neuroplasticity to transform not only brain rehabilitation, but also brain optimization. And so we're going to be this red guy walking down this new path together. Okay, so Jason, thanks for the intro. So I am the Chief Operating Officer at ABI Wellness. I'm also the Chief Scientific Officer, and as Jason mentioned, I am a neuroscientist. And I've been working before I was with ABI, I was in academia, where I was looking at, initially my focus of research was on Parkinson's disease and how physical activity can be used to improve quality of life for people with that degenerative disease. And really got to see the power of physical activity and how that can influence not only your fitness level, but also your brain. And that really inspired me to kind of delve deeper into the brain. And so my next research focus was on concussion recovery, where I looked primarily at teenager and childhood concussion recovery and the trajectory of recovery. As a child myself, I suffered a couple of concussions. Luckily, none of them had long-lasting symptoms. So this was my first experience interacting with people who had a concussion and did not recover right away. And I was working with kids who were still symptomatic 6, 8, 9 months following their injury, and got to see the real impact that that had on them, on their mental health, and just on their quality of life in general. Any time away from your sport or your friends as a kid can seem like eternity. And so it was really, really important to me to try to help figure out, why are these kids not getting better? What can we do to help them get back to what they love doing? And then while I was doing that research, I had the great opportunity to meet Mark Watson and Howard Eaton, the co-founders of ABI Wellness, and they approached my supervisor and our research team proposing this question of, could this cognitive intervention program that had been used for kids with learning disability help people with brain injury? And I'd heard about Barbara Smith-Young and the work that she'd been doing for decades in learning disabilities and with children and adults. And so it was really fascinating question to see how could this transfer and what kind of impact could this have. And keep in mind at this time, when we were looking at asking this question, the thought was that after 2 years following injury, that you'd kind of maxed out your cognitive recovery. And so wherever you were, 2 years post-injury, that's kind of your new normal. And there wasn't much hope or expectation or options available for people to continue to work towards recovery. And so we were really bucking the trend here and going against kind of the standard of care. And in addition to that, we were facing a lot of pushback even internally that people with brain injury couldn't engage in a program like this. An intensive cognitive rehab program, you're not going to get people with brain injury to engage in that. That's too much for them. And there's all these limitations put on them even before we even started. And so luckily we had a very courageous team, and Mark and Howard were very adamant that no, we should give this a try. And so we studied it and we found some incredible results. We met some amazing people in the community who had tried various forms of rehabilitation and it hadn't worked, or they weren't where they wanted to be. And we got to have them involved in the program, and it transformed their lives. And it was so inspiring, and it really highlighted the need for this work in the community. And so that really inspired the foundation of ABI Wellness and led to where we are today. And since then, we've expanded beyond brain injury to cognitive optimization. We've worked with people who've had concussion, stroke, cognitive decline from aging, athletes looking to optimize their brain health, kind of the whole spectrum of cognitive function. And it's really broadened out from brain injury to really optimizing cognition. And so what is cognition? I think that's a good spot to start because, you know, I've done a lot of these talks. Often it's been focused more on brain injury, but that's not really the target here. We're really trying to get a broader sense. And something I've learned over the years is that initially we thought that, no, we're really only working it with brain injury here. But the brain injury brain and the healthy brain or the aging brain, they're all the same. And if we can improve a brain injured brain, we can improve an aging brain, and we can help improve a healthy brain to optimize it to reach new levels. And so when we're talking about cognition, what we're talking really, you use cognition for everything. It's how you interact with the world. It's how you perform pretty much any task. So there are a lot of different components of it. There's memory, there's attention, there's planning, all these things that are deeply involved with completing any component of life. And so that's really what we're looking to influence here. Now, just for some context, since the history of the program really is around brain injury, I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing and we have a common understanding. And so with brain injury, it's really any type of injury that's occurred after birth, whether that's a fall or a concussion, a stroke, an anoxic brain injury due to lack of oxygen. They're all relatively the same. So there are a lot of different causes of brain injury. We are really looking at the impact following injury, generally at least a couple of weeks out from the injury. So really the cause of it is not as important as the symptoms that present afterwards. And so when we're looking at the cognitive function that's impacted by brain injury, we're really looking at executive function, cognitive fatigue, which is a big one, attention, processing speed, reasoning, being able to multitask. You know, not all of us are Jason and able to cook, attend a Zoom, and listen to a podcast all at the same time. That takes a lot of cognitive load. And so following injury or as we get older, it becomes harder and harder to manage those multiple variables. And that can greatly impact your ability to engage in life because you're often thrown a lot of variables at a time. And so when we look at this list of cognitive functions, it's not particular to brain injury. I mean, I have issues with attention. Everybody would want to increase their processing speed, their ability to reason in real time and be able to formulate their arguments with their family or their coworkers, you know, their debate, not argument. These are all things that are kind of, anybody could benefit from improving this. And that's really, as I mentioned, is really the learning here is that it's not just brain injury. that this can influence. And so when we think about cognitive function, what impairs cognitive function, there's a lot of different causes. We have aging, cancer, and cancer treatment, actually, because of that process. There's also PTSD and other mental illnesses that can impact your ability to function cognitively. Stress, we know that if you are under a high level of stress, your ability to use those higher order cognitive functions that reside primarily in the prefrontal cortex are impaired. Humans are very advanced and we have multiple different components of our brains, but when stress is really high, we kind of turn off the higher end part of the brain and resort back down to the lower brain, which is more reflexive. And that's why we often lash out and have our reaction to a stressful situation is maybe not what we would prefer to do if we were calm and reasoned. And then a new one that's emerged in the last 2 years that I think everyone is well familiar with at this point is COVID, and long COVID in particular, which is a really fastly emerging population of people that are showing to have quite significant impairment with their cognitive function. And just because it is a hot topic right now, I just want to talk about, in terms of COVID-19, we all know it's everywhere. That there's over 243 million cases around the world. But what we're talking about are these long haulers. So a lot of people will get better after treatment, but between 10 to 25% are thought to develop something called post-acute COVID-19 syndrome, or commonly referred to as COVID long haulers. And so they face a variety of symptoms. 50 different symptoms have been presented with long COVID, but commonly it's fatigue, shortness of breath, joint pain, and chest pain. And about 1 in 3 of the long haulers report brain fog. And brain fog is worrying because it has all those symptoms that we were talking about of cognitive impairment. So lack of concentration, slow thinking, so that's reduced processing speed, fatigue, confusion, trouble with finding your words. So very similar to brain injury and to a lot of these other causes of cognitive impairment. And so what we're now looking for is to help this population with this program as well. So when we look at so I am going to focus a bit on brain injury, but we are going to talk about neuroplasticity, and it'll all make sense once we get there. But when we look at the cognitive recovery process following brain injury, typically we see these different recovery trajectories that are on the screen. So there's the yellow for a mild TBI like a concussion, and then the purple and red for the more moderate. And so as you can see, when you get a concussion, most people, and this is for most people, they do kind of get back to that pre-injury level of function over time. Around within 3 months, they're kind of back at that level. But moderate and severe TBI, they never really get back to that initial cognitive level. And so when we founded ABI Wellness and really started to bring this program to life, what we wanted to know is, what if we could move someone who's moderate or maybe someone who's mild who hasn't returned and get them back? And what is the underlying cognitive processes and cognitive functions that define this gap here? And so our belief is that it's really around the higher order cognitive functions. So your working memory, cognitive flexibility, selective attention, and inhibition control. All those things are critical for getting back to that cognitive level. And that's exactly what the program focuses on. And so as I mentioned also earlier, the standard of care right now still is to really focus on strategies after brain injury, or any time whenever you face cognitive impairment, the focus is on strategies. And so what we're thinking about here is, like, if you have impaired memory, we're going to start recommending to write down lists of steps to take or things to do. There are apps that you can download to compensate for the decrease in cognitive function that you had. And those can be very useful, and they all have their place. But what what the program's designed to do and what Echoes is doing and what ABI Wellness is trying to do is really focus on that capacity building. And so because we know that the brain can change, what we want to do is say, okay, the brain used to function this way, and now it's not functioning the way that it can or it did. So let's work on improving that cognitive ability to get it as close to back to where it was initially, and then we can rely on these strategies afterwards. But we really want to try to optimize and recover whatever brain function we can, cognitive function that we can, and then fill in the gaps with the strategies and compensation. And so that really, ABI Wellness and our team, we really focus on this question of what if, and it's what if we could really improve outcomes for people? What if cognition didn't have to decline with age? What if people could live a better, more fulfilling life for longer, and no matter any type of injury or accident that may have occurred? And so what we're really trying to do is, in addition to any type of intervention or rehabilitation that you're going through with the BEARS program, we can, optimize that and lead to higher functional outcomes. Now, how do we do that? This all sounds great, but really how does this program really do that? And what are we really talking about here? And so what we're talking about is neuroplasticity. As a type, how do we harness that neuroplasticity? And so what neuroplasticity is the concept that the brain is plastic, it's malleable, it's changeable. For a long, long time, it was thought that when you were born, you had a period of growth where your brain would grow and you would develop. And then at a certain age, your brain just stopped growing, stopped adapting. And then if any injury happened or any other type of accident, there was no way to help because your brain was set, and that's just a fact. However, it is not a fact. And we know that the brain can change at all times. And it's very easy to see that because you can learn throughout your lifespan. You can learn languages, you can learn, you can take courses, get degrees, as long as you're alive, the brain's always able to change. And so what's happened in the last 10, 15 years is that thought process has moved into rehabilitation. And how do we harness that brain's innate ability to change? And how do we control it in a way that can be targeted to helping people improve the areas that they need to improve? And so with neuroplasticity, the way the brain works is that there's a lot of connections throughout the brain. And these connections help you relate concepts together, help coordinate your thoughts. And so when you have a thought or perform an action or remember a task, there's a pathway, there's a neural network involved. And the more often you do that, exercise, task, whatever it is, the stronger that pathway is. So the first time you do it, it's going to be really hard. For example, I'm going to use the piano. So the first time you play a piece on the piano, it's really challenging. It's very mentally taxing because you're really trying to learn it the first time and you haven't done it before. So it'll be really inefficient and it'll take a lot of effort. But the more you play, the more you practice, the stronger that pathway comes until it's second nature because the brain wants to go down that path because it's done it before. And then, so that's really what we're trying to do with this neuroplasticity. And that can both be a good thing and a bad thing. So you can have bad habits that form really strong pathways in the brain. And then we want to do that less and less and less. And then that pathway gets weaker and weaker. So neuroplasticity can work in two ways. Now that we understand what neuroplasticity is, the question is, how do we cause neuroplastic change? And so the example with the piano is that it's a new task, or it's also a complex task. So there are really 5 things that are involved with causing neuroplastic change. And in order to accurately or effectively lead to neuroplastic change, we need to make sure all 5 are consistently attained. And so to start with, we're going to focus on attention. And so in order to rewire the brain, you have to have focused attention on a specific task. If you're multitasking like Jason, it's going to be really challenging to cause that neuroplastic change. So we really want to have very focused attention on the task that we're working on. Sorry to pick on you, Jason.
I can handle it.
The second one is sustained engagement. And so if you do a task one time or for 5 minutes, that's not enough of an effort or engagement in that task to really cause change. We really need to have a sustained amount of time and repeated time spent on a particular task to really cause that change, because we need that pathway to be ran through over and over again. It's like a highway going from a country road, and as the traffic increases, you make it into a 2-lane road, and then you pave the road, and then it turns into a highway. But you need to get that traffic going along that path. The third one is effortful processing. And so the task needs to be hard. If I don't have to try to do the task, if it's super easy, it's going to be hard for me to pay attention. It's not going to be very engaging, and that won't lead to that neuroplasticity. And so it needs to be hard, not too hard that I'm going to give up, but just hard enough that that it challenges me and I'm able to actually complete the task. The fourth one is it needs to be new. So if it's old and I've done it before, again, it's not a new pathway. So it has to be new. And then the last one is differentiated stimulation. And so it's how and that's really the great thing about this program, is that we are really targeting a specific cognitive function. And so if you're doing a task that's too broad, then there's no real neural pathway going. We want a very specific task, so we can be as sure as possible that that same neural pathway is being activated. And so everyone here has been doing clocks, and that's why we really want to avoid compensation, because that relies on a different neural pathway to complete the task. And so we really want to be very focused and doing the exercise the right way in order to do that. So we've heard a lot of me talking, but I do have a quick little video about neuroplasticity that I find does a good job explaining it. So I'm just going to share that. I just want to make sure that my audio is going to share when I... Okay. Jason, let me know if you can hear it.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain. and experience neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Perfect. So what I really love about that video is when it explains neuroplasticity quite well, but it also makes neuroplasticity seem so accessible, because we've all inadvertently completed neuroplastic change in our own brains without realizing it. And so it feels a lot less daunting when you look at it that way, instead of trying to think, oh, I need to do something to really cause neuroplasticity, and thinking of it as a new thing. It's not new. You've been doing it since you were born, and you'll be doing it for as long as you're alive. So, I think it's really exciting that it's such a natural process. And with the program that we have, by targeting those 5 key things around neuroplasticity, we're able to harness that in a way that you're able to cause the change that you're looking for, that'll impact your quality of life. So this is, just further highlighting the, how we harness that neuroplasticity. There are negative factors that you want to reduce. And so we want to reduce chronic stress. As I mentioned, we want to reduce anxiety. If possible, reduce chronic pain. So if you're in pain when you're trying to focus on something, that's going to impact you. And sleep is also very important. So we want to just reduce any sleep deprivation. And then we want to increase these positive factors around neuroplasticity. So increasing your active, sustained engagement on the task, your effortful processing. And so that's why the coaches like Jason and Niall and Raf and Emily are so great, because they're able to keep everybody on task and make sure that they're putting in that effort that's required. We want to make sure that we increase the novelty and complexity of the exercise as we're going. And you want to get positive reinforcement and feedback and reward for completing a task. So setting personal bests and being able to see your progress is super important in terms of maintaining that engagement. And then the exercise and mindfulness are key as well. So we know through research that exercise is extremely beneficial for neuroplasticity, particularly for the release of various proteins in the brain, and that can really help with neuroplasticity. So if you do exercise right before the program, or any kind of hard cognitive task, really, your performance will be improved. And then mindfulness helps with a lot of those negative factors. So with mindfulness, not only does it improve attention, but it also can help reduce stress, reduce anxiety, and have a variety of other benefits in terms of your engagement and essentially neuroplasticity. And so with a targeted program like the BEARS program at Echoes, we're able to provide this stimulation that requires that effortful processing. And this will lead to that structural and functional changes in the brain. And, initially it was just a theory that, this program could really cause this structural or functional changes. We see these improvements in day-to-day life, but what is it really doing? And with the research that we did with that first group, we actually saw changes in the connectivity of the brain networks that were linked with improvements in cognitive performance. So we actually visibly saw the rewiring and that neuroplasticity take effect. And the brain became a lot more efficient following the program. And so where we saw that rewiring, where the brain was able to form those networks, those pathways, and strengthen them and become those kind of that super highway to complete the task, instead of relying on a whole bunch of back roads to get there. And when we improve our cognitive capacity and our ability to learn, it allows us to increase our social and emotional well-being, our ability to perform our jobs, engage with our communities, our families, our friends, and just lead to a better quality life. And that's really ultimately what we're all trying to do, is help everyone live to their utmost potential. And through whether it's cognitive optimization, cognitive recovery, whatever the reason that you're looking to improve your brain function, the program can help. And that's kind of everything I have at the moment. I can always talk more about the research that we've done or other research that's out there, but I'm open to answering any questions that are that anybody wants answered to start, and then we can go on from there.
Thanks, Shaun. That was really informative. So I've invited folks to put questions into the chat, or you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. If someone wants to ask a question in person on a webinar, can they do that directly?
I don't think so. I think it has to be through the Q&A.
Great. Fantastic. One question, Shaun, is about the longer term effects of neuroplasticity. I know when I talk to people, they say this is great, this is really exciting. But is it like exercise where you do it and then like if I exercise for the next week, am I just gonna like stay ripped and I don't have to worry about that for the rest of my life? Can you just talk a little bit to that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, and you're right, it does come up often. And luckily, unlike exercise, where you're generally working at a higher level than you do in your day-to-day life, on the cognitive side, through the program, what we're doing is we're really trying to increase your cognitive function so that you can use that in day-to-day life. And so when we improve that neuroplasticity through the program, improve that cognitive function, what we're finding is that the change is stable and relatively permanent, because now you're able to actually utilize those cognitive functions that you couldn't use before. And so the goal is not to do the program and then go and not use your brain at all afterwards. We want you to go out, use your brain in your everyday activities as you want to, and the changes should be maintained.
Great, thanks. Next question here, just to tag on to that, neuroplasticity is there a minimum of time that a person needs to experience a positive effect of neuroplasticity, or is it really individually based?
There's going to be a lot of individual aspects to it. We have to make sure that the engagement is high, but there is, we've found a minimum amount of time that needs to be spent in the program. There's not a lot of consensus around that, but we do know that if you're doing an exercise for just like going to the gym, if you work out for 5 minutes at a time and then a couple times a week, that's not really going to lead to very quick results. And so there does need to be some significant commitment to the program and engagement in the exercises to cause that. The research that we've done to date, we have seen generally 3 to 6 months be the minimum that we want to see in the program in order to cause lasting change. That's not to say that you won't see changes earlier than that. We have seen people notice changes in their cognitive function and their ability 2 weeks into the program. But what we don't want is people to stop as soon as they first notice change, because that's just the start. And we're just starting to get a signal there. And what we want is people to keep going for at least the 3-month mark to really cement those changes, because as we saw in the video, you can have 2 strong pathways going, and what we want is to really cement the new good neural pathway that we created through the exercise, which is optimizing your function, and let the other one go. And if we stop too soon, then that could be, we might not have enough time.
Great, thanks, John. Next question here is, what does BEARS stand for? Now I could tell you, everybody, what it stands for. I'm going to let Shaun, you're the man of the hour. What does BEARS stand for? Let us in on it.
Great question. It stands for the Brain Enhance and Recovery System. And so it's just the name of the platform. And it was just a fun acronym to come up with. But yes.
Thank you. Next question here is, well, first of all, a comment, great presentation. So thank you.
Thank you.
And wondering what research we are currently working on.
Great question again. So we are just in the process of wrapping, kind of in the data analysis stage of a study that we did with the Center for Aging Brain Health Initiative, looking at older adults and their engagement and how this program could help prevent further cognitive decline and help people age in place. That study went for, I guess, about a year. It started right around the launch of the start of COVID, so it was there was a lot of changes that happened over time, but we had some really good engagement in the program, and I'm hoping to see some good results there. And then in addition to that, we're in the process of finalizing the details of a research study in the US with a hospital. And I think it's actually up online already. So the research will be done with Brigham and Women's Hospital as part of Mass General in Boston. And so they're going to be looking at studying the impact of this program for people with a wide range of brain injury and just cognitive impairments. So super excited about that study as well.
Thanks, Shaun. That is really exciting indeed. And you can check that out right on their website if you go to Brigham and Women's Hospital or Harvard Medical School, it will be on their page there. So that's really.
And I think we'll have a link at abwellness.com soon as well to take you to that page as well.
Perfect. Another question here is asking specifically between sleep, nutrition, and exercise. What would you say of those three is the most important when you're talking about neuroplasticity and cognitive change? So sleep, nutrition, and exercise.
Ooh, good question. Okay.
It's like picking your favorite kid.
I mean, they're all very important.
Right.
It's hard to highlight one over the other. However, I would, in general terms, sleep is very important. Just for general health, but also for your cognitive health. So if you're not sleeping at all, then that needs to be addressed probably first. It's so critically important to have deep sleep as well, in order for the brain to clear out a lot of the bad things that develop over the day, in terms of memory and just overall alertness. I would say sleep is your first thing that you should take care of. Now, if you're sleeping 7 hours versus sleeping 8 hours, that's not going to make a huge difference in neuroplasticity and your cognitive function. But we need to make sure that everyone's getting at least a reasonable amount of sleep for them.
Great.
But in terms of nutrition and exercise, if you utilize exercise immediately before the program or before cognition, it can have a very strong boost to the neuroplasticity. And so I think that one would be a good one to highlight.
Fantastic. Another question. Are there means to improve specific learning areas, such as, for example, language acquisition, through targeting specific areas of the brain that are responsible for particular things like language processing from a brain training or neuroplasticity perspective?
Yes. So there are a lot of different exercises that Barbara has developed, but also just other exercises that can help with language. When you're saying language acquisition, are you? I'm not sure if they're referring to learning a new language or just kind of working with language. And so it does vary, but there are definitely exercises available that Jason can talk to you about if you're interested to learn more. That does target the language centers.
Yeah, thanks. And just as a follow-up, yeah, new language was where that question was coming from specifically.
Okay. I mean, so if we're talking about new language, then I wouldn't necessarily look for particular programs for that, but I would remember those 5 key things that are involved with neuroplasticity. And if you are trying to learn a language, make sure that you utilize those steps. And so make sure that you have focused attention, spend enough time on it, that you make sure that it's not too hard. I think a lot of us, when we want to learn a new language, we jump in and we're maybe overly ambitious, and it can get really hard, and we don't see a lot of progress as soon as we'd like to see it. And so it's really making sure that you do it in a way that you start to see some success. So learn individual words to start with, focus just on reading or just on speaking it, kind of make it manageable, and really make sure that you spend enough time on the same exercise, the same word, the same selection of words to really get that neuroplasticity going.
Great. And as Shaun said, if people are wondering about other types of language acquisition, be it through brain injury or through learning difficulty or what have you, there are other programs other than the similar relations or the clocks exercise that help to target that more specifically. So reach out to any of us and we can point you in the right direction for sure, or at least have a conversation about it. Thanks for that question. Next question is, in terms of research, do we know how PTSD is linked to neuroplasticity?
Yeah, so there is a lot of new research coming out on PTSD. What we're finding is that, well, not we, but what is being found is that following PTSD, the brain can kind of shut down or turn off certain components, and so the brain isn't utilizing as much of the higher order components of the brain as it was before. And so there are quite a few groups that are looking at addressing that to kind of recalibrate the brain and get it back to a status, homeostasis kind of level, and not in that high stress space. And what we're finding, in addition to that, cognitive training has been shown to help with PTSD because it helps pull the brain back into that prefrontal cortex and reactivates those neural pathways, because with that high level of stress, it's often impacted. But happy to talk more about that with whoever asked the question.
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. I will announce at the end, or even put it into the chat, how people can reach out if they want to talk more in depth and privately with any of us. So thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer. And we have another one here. Has there been research done on if and or how the BEARS program or other neuroplasticity exercises can delay or prevent the onset of dementias such as Alzheimer's?
Well, the study we're actually looking that's just wrapping up, we were looking to see if we could, cognitive decline has a timeline, and so you have healthy brain, and then it starts to, through the aging process, there's a natural cognitive decline, and then you reach a point where you can be diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, and that's kind of the first stage of Alzheimer's dementia, and then the decline furthers after that. And so what we were really looking to do is, could a program like this delay people from getting that? So they noticed a cognitive decline, but they haven't been diagnosed with MCI in particular. Can we delay that and keep people from getting to that point? And then the next question is, if someone has mild cognitive impairment, can we improve their cognition to no longer meet the diagnosis requirements? And so we're still really early stages in this. there's a lot of different causes for cognitive decline. And so you need to make sure that we need to make sure that we're addressing all the other components, make sure that nutrition, sleep, physical exercise is being utilized, and then optimizing that with the cognitive intervention. And my hope is that through this program, through a program like this, we could help people, again, age in place with a high quality life for as long as possible. But we're still, as I said, really early days in the research on that.
Great, thanks for the question. Thanks for the answer. The person who asked the question, rather, if you would like more, again, we're going to put some information in the chat so you can reach out, and we can talk some more on that. I do have one more question. If an area of your brain has been damaged, will other areas help to carry the processing load?
Yes, and to an extent, yes. So if you do damage a portion of the brain is, as we said, plastic. So it is able to adapt around it. So stroke is a good example. Oftentimes with stroke, there's a bleed inside the brain, and it causes death of some of the brain cells around that area. And so through rehabilitation and with time, the brain will rewire itself around that, and a lot of cognitive function can be regained with proper rehabilitation. There are limitations to that, but yes, it is possible.
Great. That's good news.
And there's actually some really cool research out there with people that have had sections of their brain removed due to surgery that have been able to engage, been able to recover or not lose a lot of cognitive function. And they actually found a woman in China who was born with no cerebellum, and she was able to walk and live a perfectly normal life, even without that brain, that very critical brain structure being there.
Great, thanks. This has been really enlightening and really uplifting. I think the message for me is that it's never too late, and that if you're not content with what you currently have, then you don't need to stay there. That there is help, and that we can change our brains. That they're not fixed, and that we can be in the driver's seat a little bit. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, but we can be in the driver's seat. We can help to lead that change. And in my experience, that when I've been open to new things, that good things happen. So, Shaun, we're really grateful that you were here with us. Really grateful for your expertise and your willingness and your ability to share it so articulately.
Thank you so much, and I agree with your closing statement in that, you know, this is really you are in the driver's seat. I think that's the most exciting thing about neuroplasticity and programs that harness and target that, is that you're in control. So if you want to put in the work and you want to engage in a program, then we know with the research that you can drive that change in your own brain.
Yeah, and this is really, really exciting to positively affect people's lives.
Yeah.
So thank you. So I put into the chat a couple of ways that you can contact us if you'd like to, by email, start@myechoes.com, or there's a phone number there, 888-803-2467. It's toll free, and one of us will be there to answer your questions or direct you to the people that you need to speak to.
Perfect.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll put out a notice for our next educational opportunity, and we look forward to that. In the meantime, stay safe, and don't forget that the brain can change.